I'm refining this every time, so let's start with this. Please introduce yourself and why we should, let me put this in a way that doesn't sound bad, but at the same time is direct. Why we
Why
should
should we
listen
do?
to you. I absolutely do want to, but I want the audience to understand why what you say is something that they should want to hear.
So first question was who I am, right? Okay. So my name is Kim, and I'm a Swedish lighting designer and CEO in a lighting company. I've worked as a manager in different levels of companies for the last 10 years. I basically came out of university and worked for 2 or 3 years. And then I got my first job as a manager at a very early age. I was 20 something and, you know, in charge of people in their 60s. So that was an interesting start. And throughout the years, I worked in both bigger and smaller companies. I worked in the consultant side of things, which we have here, technical consultancies. And I've also worked at the manufacturer side of lighting. So I also have some experience from sales and from producing companies and how everything works there. And one thing they all have in common is I've been in companies in very much high speed growing tempos. So they've all been developing very fast over the years when I was there, which probably affected how I've become as a leader today. And most recently, before becoming the CEO here, I started up a group of a department in another bigger technical consultancy company. And over the years there, I learned very much about value-based company culture and the benefits of using value-based company culture over any other company culture, actually, and the need for us as leaders to work very dedicated with value-based leadership and value-based working cultures in order to get very, very results that is a great market into pieces.
Okay, great. A little bit of distortion, profit by values. I appreciate that. Thank you, because I mean, personally, I think almost everybody has some insight. If, to be honestly, mainly what I have led C-suite executives in a classroom teaching English. I've also led 2-year-olds. They're not necessarily significantly different. The vocabulary is different, the topics are different, but human beings are human beings. And if you've led a group of anybody of any size for any amount of time, hopefully we gain insight. And if we don't, maybe it's not our best. Like if an English class, just as an example, it might sound trivial, but if an English class goes poorly and it continues to happen, then you go, well, I have to question about how I'm doing. What am I doing or not doing that would make that different? If it goes well and consistently you go, well, it appears that I'm doing something in a way that is leading at least this group correctly. So it's interesting. So let's head into these questions and let me know about your time, because I've realized actually what I need is 2 hours, even if it takes 1 hour. That is, I don't need 2 hours, but I need 2 hours leeway depending on the interview so that people have enough time to say what they want to say. Better to do it that way than the other way. So the first question is,
shoot,
what are the most significant challenges you face in transforming workplace culture and leadership within your organization or your clients' organizations?
I would say the greatest challenge is all the time is that there's so many people who still thinks it's the best to do what they have always done, and they believe that change is hard. You know, that classical image when you have a leader saying, who wants change? And everybody says, yeah, I want change. I can see it will get better. But then you have like, who want to be part of that change and lead that change. And you have like one person showing their hand. So I would say one of the biggest issues would be that you have these groups in companies. You have the little group who will be on board directly, and you have the mid group who could come on board if they get a little bit more information. And then you have that last group who is totally adverse to any change and think that it's horrible and painful and so on. And I've changed my language in so many meetings today, so my head's a bit jumbled. I just spoke Norwegian with a colleague, but and also I would say in combination with the different set of skills and communication you need to carry to get all of these people aboard, even though they are so different from each other. So you would need, you know, to communicate one way with one of these groups, another way with the second and with the third. And then you have individuals in these groups who in themselves needs to be communicated to in another set of ways, and longer, shorter, written, spoken, pictures and whatever. And my experience, the main obstacle for most leaders is communication and not understanding the need of adapting that towards the group that they are leading.
Right. I find myself more and more both in meetings, in any sort of presentation when I'm asked to answer a question. I don't know where I picked it up, but I just thought it was darn wise, so I did it. It's like, does that make sense? Does that, you know, do you follow that? And especially in a context of learning, I oftentimes is like, excellent. Can you please tell me how you would apply that? Because especially here in Japan, what you have is you have this this thing called tatemae and honne. Tatemae means your public polite face. Honne is your true feelings. And because conflict is to be avoided at all cost in every situation, it can be bad and good. But when you're in a classroom and in a society where everybody really cares, even more than in maybe any other society on earth, about what everybody else thinks, particularly their seniors who may be in the room, they don't want to be seen to misunderstand or feel dumb. So it's like, do you understand? They go, what does that mean? That's Japanese for no, I don't, but I'm going to pretend I do. It's like, excellent. Can you please use that? What we just talked about, can you give me an example of that from your work? Right. But I do it in such a way, it isn't gotcha, you're lying to me. It was like, I knew it. I laugh with them. I create that psychological safety because it's needed, but I will also always call them on it. It's like, if I think you're faking it, please demonstrate it, because I want to make sure you understand or I'm not doing my job. Okay, the next one is, could you describe a recent situation where you felt your leadership team or that of your client's leadership team could have benefited from additional training or guidance in culture building, leadership, or both?
Oh, yes, most definitely. In the most recent company where I was hired to well, basically drive through some changes when a big Finnish company bought up a smaller Swedish company, and they needed someone to kind of facilitate, you know, getting all the Finnish ideas of how things should be run into the Swedish company. And the thing is that the Swedish CEO who sold his company to the Finnish organization is a ruler of fear and control. So naturally, all of his managers are, you know, not used to speak out. They're not used to lead with coaching. They're also leading with more control and, well, negative ways of leading workforces. And I also managers that were participating in bullying and you know, name calling and really, really bad ways of managing a company, and managers badly, poorly handling people in general. So here was a very big challenge to, first of all, before we could do anything to implement the values and the culture from the Finnish company, we need to, you know, clean up what's not working in-house. But yeah, that was easier than done. The CEO had meetings with me, and he understood what we needed to change and what we needed to do. The group of managers did as well. But after we've come, say, almost to the finish line of most of the hard work we had to do in the beginning to kind of start speaking honestly to each other, understanding what's not okay on a workplace and what will be the benefits of doing things differently, then they fired. And the reason for that was the fear of the CEO. he knew he needed to change, but there was not anything in his 70-year-old head that could change.
Okay, I get it, I think.
So my lesson being that sometimes, even though you do your best and you can see that you get change takes time, and sometimes you'll hit a wall. I would say that I've very rarely in my career met those walls. There's normally a way around them, but this time it was. But I'm not sure that is a great answer to your question, but that's the most tricky thing I had to do in the last few years, where there were a very strong need to educate both the CEO and the managers in order to get things done. So I sent 4 out of 6 group managers to different leaderships, educations. And I'm quite sure that even if they don't have me there anymore, at least the managers personnel. So I feel like on a group level, on like the first grassroots level of the company, things have started to change, and that's a very good feeling to leave it with. And I'm also happy that the CEO will probably be in pension in like 1 year, so there's hope for them yet.
Great. Actually, I think that's a good answer for a lot of reasons. One of them be, you go to, online seminars and everybody's awesome. All they've done is said hi and you're giving them a high five. That's not the reality of business. That's not the reality of the universe and life. Sometimes, regardless of the effort you put in, it doesn't work out perfect, or it just utterly fails. It's not a question, and it's not personal, and that's hard to accept. But it's not personal when things outside of your control don't go the way you want them to, or the way you'd hoped they would. But that's life. So actually,
Yeah.
I like your answer. I think it's fantastic, and it touched on a lot of the things that are a common theme even so far, even though done, and that is that change tends to need to be in bite-sized pieces. It needs to be gradual. What you talked about, all I'm thinking is I have these psychological safety alarms going off. It's like nobody felt safe.
No, nobody.
Probably including the CEO, because he didn't feel safe to say things like, I don't know, which
Precisely.
last time I checked, know everything.
And in general, I would say that leadership, that the ones that lead with control, they do it because of fear. They have like a chaotic inner self, which they feel very insecure with. And the only way for them to kind of keep that in check is to control and to everyone else.
Right. It's like an ongoing imposter syndrome kind of behavior.
Yeah.
It's like, if anybody actually finds out that I don't know, I have to make them too afraid to test me. Like what I talked about.
Precisely.
Yeah, what I talked about doing in the classroom. Fortunately, in that particular setting, their rank doesn't matter, because I have a rank of my own in that context. They might be the top person in, and some of them were, in their thing, but they're not the top person in the room in English. But it was actually really great, because I was able to take one of the most senior people in the room, let them know it's okay and that you have to speak English, it's not optional, and that it's okay if you don't know. I usually start my classes by having them in this context speak Japanese. But I would have you, if we were in a training and you were one of my students for whatever reason, I would have you ask me a question either in any language that I don't speak, or a question you're certain I don't know the answer to. If I know it, I'll try to answer it. But my purpose isn't to answer the question, is to show I don't know that. I don't know anything about accounting. I don't really know anything about I'm sorry, I don't speak Swedish or Finnish or German or any of the many languages. So just the idea to remove the fear of the words, I don't know, I'm not sure, is a big thing. And once I established that within a group, it took a long time, but that one person who felt shy about basically being not the smartest person in the room to their seniors in something they did better than them, once he started to feel safe with that, his English immediately improved, and he realized nobody was condemning him for not being good at English. It's not what he's an expert at. Everybody doesn't know something. So
I think that that is probably why I also feel it's very important that managers can own up to failures, because of course we won't do everything right, and sometimes we fail, and if we are the one people looking up to, it needs to be important that we can own up to our own failures and change to the better for the next time, because that will enable what you're describing here, someone else actually daring to do the same thing with say their clients or the projects or whatever.
Right. I need help. So, and that's why I like your answer too. It's not only the reality of life, like Ray Dalio, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but he's a god of business and finance and wisdom, as far as I'm concerned, talks about it all the time, that you need to be able to do things like that, to be able to admit that you don't know or not everything works out perfectly. And only under that environment are you going to get people saying, excuse me, boss, please don't beat me, but you're wrong about that because A, B, and C. Within the context of Bridgewater Associates, he's retired now, but in the company he founded and ran, Bridgewater Associates, you were contractually obligated to object if you had credible reason for doing so. So you could be the janitor and you could be fired for telling Ray Dalio or not telling Ray Dalio he's wrong because you happen to be a gemologist in your spare time, and you know that what they're saying about that mineral company is completely false because it's literally impossible. You have to put up your hand or you might be fired for not saying it if and only if you have credible knowledge. And that's amazing. That goes through Netflix. That was the case at Toy Story or something comparable, where anybody, Ed Catmull said, if the most powerless or the lowest ranking person in the room feels unsafe to raise an objection, you fail.
Yeah.
Love that.
I agree.
So next one.
100%.
Genius book. He just redid the Creativity Inc. And anytime there's an update from books like that, I make sure to listen to the update, the newest version. Next one is, what specific outcomes would you hope to achieve through training in leadership and culture building?
Plenty. Let's see which I'm to start with. For example, I think if you're going to train your leaders, you need to start by thinking, why do I need to do that? And what kind of training do they need to have for us to get the outcome that we want to have? But from everything I've learned, both through my career, but also through reading and, scientific studies on workforces and such, it feels quite clear to me that if we have a workforce, for example, that feels good, they feel like they can express themselves, they feel like they have a work-life balance, they are happy to pursue the things they have the tools in place to do their best. And if we can create that culture, and all I can see is profit, because that's where it leads to. When you have the most brilliant people satisfied and with the right tools, you can get them to reach heights which were not possible before. You can create better teams. You can make them more effective. You could, over time, just let them work for the same pay in 4 days a week and not having to do anything on Friday if they want to. So for me, the main end goal might be that the company is more profitable. But I wouldn't want a workforce that is profitable feels shitty, because that would feel hurtful to me as a person. So it's a combination goal of a profitable company and humane workforce logic, if one can call it that.
Sure. So I really like what you said, and yes, feel free to swear on here. As you can tell, I'm a little less formal than I might be. I've had some sort of mental conflict and conflict with other people saying, but Tim, that's such a terrible first impression. It's like, this is Japan and it's really hot. I could either be drenched in sweat and look like I've run a marathon wearing a nice business suit, or I could wear this, live to my environmental ethics, that if I wear more than this, then I have to turn up my air conditioning, and it's already on pretty high. So yeah, but I
think
really
the climate will probably just applaud you for having less AC and less clothes.
That's my moral position, is sort of like, I do want to give the good impression, but if somebody listens to what I do for more than about 5 seconds, they realize my IQ is not lowered, but if anything, and because my background is neuroscience, I will argue very, very insistently raised by an increased level of physical comfort of my body. So I'm smarter like this, maybe by just a fraction, a quarter of an IQ point, than with a suit on, always thinking about how uncomfortable I am, where my attention is taken away from what I'm doing.
But you know that Swedes in general aren't dressing up as business casual even in most companies here.
Awesome.
And especially in a designing company, you will be quite relaxed. I mean, I don't have a suit on and I'm the CEO.
Well, you're a little more formal than me though. But the other thing I really liked about what you
That's
said
because I had an interview before meeting you.
There you go.
Interviewed and recruit.
So the other thing I really liked about your previous answer is the fact that you talked about if it's driven by increasing the bottom line, which things like psychological safety and that drives discretionary effort virtually always improves, because if they don't hate you, they might be willing to stay that extra 15 minutes, do that extra care. But if they hate you, the boss or the leader, well, then they can just go, well, I can't get caught doing something that I know that's harming the company, and I don't care because I hate them because they make me feel bad every time I'm anything less than perfect. You should expect that as a leader if you treat people poorly. But that increase in profit, which is almost inevitable if you lead well and in a good culture, that if you can't feel good about that, as you said, if I feel shitty about making it profitable, then it's not good. Now, short of getting sued, I can think of one of the biggest companies in the world who should feel bad about the way they make profit. They're very good at what they do, but I couldn't see myself working for them because I wouldn't feel good about the way they behave in business with literally everybody except their customers. Everybody else they treat poorly and they're famous for it. To me, that's not okay. That's not a world I would like to facilitate.
And if you take a comparison between a company that has a good, strong value-based culture, which they work dedicatedly with over several years and kind of never dropping the stick on it, or dropping the ball on it, maybe is the expression. And you compare it to a company who's driven by just profit. We think the profit will make everyone feel happy and the company grow, and But if you compare those two companies to each other over time, I'm 100% certain that we will see more profit in the company which keeps its employees, who have less sick leave, who has a better work culture, probably be profitable time, just because you reach something like sick leave.
And there's research to support
expensive here at it.
Right. Yeah. And there's research to support that, whether you talk about Jim Collins in Great by Choice or Good to Great, or Bob Sutton and Huggy Rao in Scaling Up Excellence, or a lot of other ones, that if it wasn't their own research, they point to research all over the place. Like even in Silicon Valley, it was like when you're selecting your employees, that who is the superstar, it's not that there isn't something to that, but if those superstars are sort of abusive or generally bad to work with, in actually Bob Sutton, one of his books is called The No Asshole Rule, and I love it because it really gets to the honest point that even if you're a superstar but you treat people badly, that is not good for your company. And even the most famous asshole in the world, Steve Jobs, what he did was he was famous. Now, people like Ed Catmull talk about him very affectionately. They don't deny how he was young, but that he got better over time, which is good. But you also, in the companies where people feel unhappy, and I just finished a book by the company I was mentioning, whose name I'm avoiding, that it is pretty much a foregone conclusion that a lot of the top talent is going to leave. It seems almost like it's expected because it's an adversarial culture. It's a sort of Darwinian culture where people aren't feeling good. They're not feeling secure in their jobs. Mistakes are punished either immediately or shortly thereafter. So you're hiding mistakes rather than revealing them. And in the research around that, medical care clinics, they found that at first that mistakes, they documented that mistakes went up, and then they found it wasn't that mistakes went up, It was that the reporting of mistakes went up, which had the ultimate long-term effect of making better methodologies in preventing mistakes. At first, it was like, well, we have the lowest. It was like, no, you're just the best at hiding your mistakes, which are literally potentially costing lives because you don't feel safe to prove you're not perfect. And that when
and
they
of
did
course,
that,
if we have employees who doesn't feel safe to point out what's wrong, there will be a lot of troubles following that. For example, in our industry, if we do a project and we deliver something, we always also do like an internal review before sending the documents out, for example. And that's like crazy important steps for us to learn from. And if people don't make mistakes, they will not learn as well as if they do everything perfectly all the time. So I feel it's very important that people are allowed to feel safe to express and feel comfortable with doing something wrong. So I totally understand why science would say that it's bad not to be able to express your fears of failures.
Right. Well, and that goes into both growth mindset and psychological safety. I didn't learn about them from the academic research. I learned their names from the academic research, but I'm going to be honest with you, any conscientious teacher who's worth their salt and actually cares about their students, they learn it in the classroom. I had students who were, in Angela Duckworth, when she talks about grit, who pointed me towards Carol Dweck regarding psychological safety. All that they said, it was like, yeah, I know you have been in a real classroom because I've been there too. Some of my most challenged students, now we're talking about on the edge of developmental disabilities, not there, but clearly more challenging to think and understand things than anybody in the classroom. But this particular individual that I'm thinking of, he loved me because I never really made him feel like if you didn't understand, it's like, that's okay, you tried. And real try, not fake try. Not 8th place trophies for, like I said, breathing or being in the room or anything like that. But he tried at his level and he was never made to feel bad. So total growth mindset that later I learned the name from the academic research. So I've seen it, especially in the classroom with language. So next one, in your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders should possess to create a thriving organizational culture?
I definitely think they need to be good at communication. So have feedback skills and coaching skills in their set of leadership style. I think it will be helpful if they understand things like adapt, see the communication after who you are speaking to. And it's quite clear to me that some people just do that because that's who they are, and other ones need to train a little bit more to get there. I would also say that something like, maybe grit is the good word for it. You need to be able to see things through and not give up or lose your motivation when you hit a snag or even have to go back a few steps. I think you also need to be quite good at acceptance. I wouldn't call that a skill, perhaps. A leader will be more effective if they can accept when things are going on and they can quite quickly again bounce back up and say that we'll do it. I also think it's important that they get training in what a value-based culture is and what the benefits of that is, so that they can work structurally. How do you say that?
Structurally.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a tongue twister.
With it over time, because like for right now, I'm in the start of starting up a company. So one of the first things I do when I have a team in place is to, together discuss and set the values, not related to the skills of a leader. Sorry, I'm dwindling it away a bit. I don't necessarily think that a leader needs to be, the best in the field in which they're working, the best person at certain things. I think the most important thing is that they are best at leadership and best to see people and understand the communication side of things. I feel like everyone has had a boss which they didn't approve of in some way. And for me, at least, the red line there that goes through, like the thread going through all of them. Fortunately, I have had a lot of good managers that I could learn from. So, but the poor ones were definitely the ones who didn't understand communication, the ones who couldn't understand feedback, who would be discriminating, who couldn't understand the value of a good leader because it was a woman, or she was not 40 years old, or it was a man, but he was just 20, or blah, blah, blah. Or he was black, or he was gray, or he was whatnot. But I'm not sure how to connect that to specific skill, actually, describing it. My main point is that if you have a leader who kind of can have a clear vision, tools to get there by not giving up too easily, being able to bounce back when you hit a snag or an obstacle, and someone who can communicate with adaptation towards the group they're leading. If they can do that, I think they can do a lot.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I'm just going to add to that one point, and that is, you're right. I mean, it's great if you happen to have the skills of Elon Musk. And let me qualify that. His skills as a scientist are fantastic. His skills as a leader, not so much. He should be hiring you and I before the debacle happened and he decided to fire way too much of his workforce and then had to go begging back to get people that that was a big mistake. He needs to know what he's good at versus what he isn't. And that goes for all of us, right? But I mean, as you said, the best or the most likely to succeed is probably not the best in the industry, but the best at leading others, because if I need to deal with the lighting or the value-based culture change that you are an expert at, well, I might be able to Frankenstein something together. Why would I bother if I could instead identify somebody who was already good at it and do that? That separation of ego.
Precisely.
You go, I'm not the best at personnel management. Perhaps I should farm that out to somebody who I know is better than I. So yeah, you can always hire good talent. Yes. Okay, so next one is, what do you think is the ideal duration for a comprehensive course on transforming workplace culture, leadership, or both?
What we did in the former company where I worked was very good, I think. So that might be a good example. Like when you started as a manager in that company, you would get a introduction to what the values in the company were, and that they're not just words that someone wrote on a wall. That's something you live and breathe and behave by. And you're educated in this set of behaviors that are expected of you to be able to live those values. And you do that very early on in your employment. Then you have a set of courses over the first year you work. So you will, I think the education is spread out over a year with group trainings and individual trainings, discussions and tests and a whole lot of things. And then after that first year, all personnel, not just managers, everyone in the company, every spring and every autumn needed to go to a refreshment course. Also, 2 times a year, every department in the company, no matter if it was the CEO and the top management, or if it was the cleaners, all the departments did something which is called a value dialogue. So they would rate their own behaviors and how well they were actually living up to the values, if they were behaving correctly. So they would kind of, say, we're good at this or we're bad at this. And then everyone in that group needed to agree on 2 things that they needed to be better at. And every individual needed to make a promise in regards to meet something that would lead to doing that thing that was bad better.
So like a concrete action?
A concrete action, yes, definitely, very. Nice. And it would be like, you give it to your manager, and the manager would keep it, and then in your quarterly feedback sessions and so on. I mean, we're quite a discussing people and reflective people up here. We talk a lot. So every quarter we would have a small feedback talk, and I would ask them, how are you doing with your goals, and how are you doing with your promise, and what did you do to, move forward to meet your goal. And then in autumn, everyone has to do this again. So you have the first one like in February, March, and you need to meet that goal before September in the autumn, because then in October you have to do another one. So I don't think that you can just say that we take a year or we take half a year and we work with culture. If you want an actual change, and I mean, you change your personnel over time, you need to do it so structurally, do it according to a structure over time that, can be manageable by the size of the company, of course, because it costs time if you have people that aren't getting any pay from their clients when they're in a room for an hour in spring and one in autumn. But for example, I was in that company for 8 years, and what we could see in our results was that the time we spent on that, we gained in lowering, for example, sick leave. Also lowering the rate of how often we lost people in the company, or to our competitor. So it feels to me that you can't say, go do this for a week. I definitely can say, if you want to change the culture in a company, you need a lot of time, and you need to do it by a structure, and you need to get everyone involved. If the CEO doesn't agree, it won't work. If the managers don't agree, it won't work. If the workforce is not on board, it won't work. You need to get everyone on the same page, and that takes time, especially as we talked about before, that people will take this information differently, and you need to work differently with different people. Excellent. And in regards of leadership, I think the answer would be the same. You need time. You can do some things like in a group setting and over a year, maybe to hone in on some skills and understand those growth and grit and blah, 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 coaching and so on. But essentially, when you learn as a leader, is also in your own mistakes when leading a group and seeing what's effective and what's not. If you can have people who give you feedback on what you're doing and evolve from it.
Yeah, I love that. The thing that the one question I have, because I agree with you, there's no real such thing as learning. I'm 56 and I listen to about a book a week, and I don't do that to impress people or to brag. I've done that for years before I ever shared that particular thing. Anybody, I'm doing that for me, because I'm acutely aware that I'm not yet finished. I've got a plan. I figure I'll finish learning about 3 seconds before I die, maybe at the moment. And then I hope to be able to teach beyond that, i.e. books and courses that remain, that I have something of value to give. But, the best leaders that I've followed and read and learned from, whether I knew them personally or otherwise, none of them talk about, well, I'm done. I'm the ultimate leader. Now all I have to do is give it out to the unwashed masses. It's always about, I'm never done. What are you talking about, done? So I have one question that I wanted to put in, but I wanted to let you finish your statement. And that was, when you were talking about people self-identifying, I love the self-assessment, the self-awareness piece you talked about. Once those two pieces have been identified, is it then the group has to give consensus? Yes, that's true. We agree with you. So is there an external feedback, that is, people are self-assessing, but then people either verify or disconfirm? It's like, so that they've got an outside view?
No, the group themselves do it. So it's not exactly an outside view, but for example, if it was my department, when you do all this rating on your behaviors, you actually can't write in one single rating without having a consensus in the group. So if there's just one person who says, no, we're bad at that, the grade will be bad. Doesn't matter if the other 10 think it's good. And then when all those are filled in at the end, it's the same. You will vote and see how many of us agree that these are the worst ones that we actually need to do something about.
Right.
And
it's
we will think we discuss and vote until everything is.
I'm sorry
it's
to interrupt. it's a team self-assessment of the group, not an individual self-assessment of the individuals on the team.
But of course, the individuals of the teams have to think about themselves. Okay, in the department, do we do this? Okay, do I do that? And yeah, so it's a little bit of both, but essentially what you write down is some sort of team estimate. But then the promise they do in the end is, of course, very personal towards what they should change in that move forward.
Right. And it has that social accountability, because even if, you got the document that you create at the end, but also they have accountability. They're making promises in front of the rest of their team.
Yes.
They've made those promises. So that part too.
And also it makes it very easy for everyone to remind one if someone falls out of the frame. It will be more friendly in reminding that. It won't be someone yelling at you, yeah, you can't do that, we don't do that in our company. It will be more like, hey, do you remember that we agreed on? Could you please think about that the next time, because we talked about it. It will kind of also help a lot with interpersonal communication in the office.
Yeah, because you've got the group buy-in. You came up with the document together. Yeah. You all agreed that's what needed to be done. It's pretty hard to say, no, I was just trying to explain the group. Yeah, exactly.
Pressure 101.
So, but and that's a big thing that shows up over and over again in the research that you were talking about. So the buy-in of all individuals from the leader down. But even that, if it's done right in when I think of training, is everybody should be part of, at least the research says, everybody should be part of building that. So if it's like, if we build it together, then, it's pretty hard to get resistance from somebody who says, well, I said we should do this, and now I don't agree, it's working against me.
Precisely. And actually, all the values and all the behaviors were discussed within 600 people in different workshops. So the entire company came up with what are the behaviors and what are the values. So definitely there will be a mass of people who feel like they need to own what they all agree on.
Awesome. I love that. And I have little doubt as to what the output of that is. People aren't perfect. They have bad days. They have things happen. But they have people all around them who know what the target is, the group target is, and and also support when you go, like, I'm off the wagon. How could I do this, or what can we do? What can I do now to fix this? Because again, everybody knows what was done. Love it. Okay, so the next one is what factor would influence your decision? So this relates to the question you just answered, right? So the duration. My understanding of your answers, for the most part, there isn't a duration. It's ongoing with specific frequency. So what factors would influence your decision about that ideal duration, I guess?
You mean the ideal duration for working with implementing a value-based culture or developing my leadership skills?
Yeah, sorry. I think this has already been answered because of your answer being ongoing. It's never finished. It really, let's just strike this one from the record, because it's like, because forever is inclusive, as is never.
But I also said that it needs to be, but what I also said, it needs to be forever. In a company who wants to keep having that culture, they need to work with it forever, to tweak it and change it over time as well. But you also need to have like focal points where you gather people and you do stuff, and it needs to happen several times a year for newly employees, for refreshment for other employees, and it needs to be not too short. So you can't just put people in a room for 4 hours and hope that they get it. It needs to be a little bit more than that.
Okay, so in a way, and tell me if I'm wrong, but that actually answers this question, because it's like, so what would influence what you define as an ideal duration or ideal frequency? And if I understand you correctly, you're saying it would depend on the results. That is, we would look at what just happened. Yes. That would be the thing that would influence whether we feel we needed more acute training and how often that happens. So based on the results, is that a good answer?
I would say that my answer in most things you ask actually stem from it depends.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it depends on the group, it depends on the company, it depends on a lot of things.
It does. It does. You know, I'm a neuroscience geek, but a science geek lifelong, and everything to me is like everything is just a theory until you test it, until you have some empirical results. It's like do the work that you need in the front end, but then let's test it. And if it turns out what we thought would happen doesn't happen the way we want, then we change it based on that experience. You know, it's a foregone conclusion. So what did you, just out of curiosity, it's totally outside of the purview of the question. What did you, what was your education or your passionate pursuit that got you where you are now?
Well, I am a lighting designer, so I have a bachelor in engineering for lighting design, and I also have a economy bachelor for organizational management and economy in producing company.
Excellent.
And in between I actually started up as doing in another, I started studying one engineering program, but didn't really like it. So after half a year, I quit. And then for half a year, what I studied was sociology. I'm actually quite good at English, but I apparently can't say this thing.
No, your English is excellent. Sociology. The bottom line is, if you don't use it, it's like
for
anything
like,
else.
yeah, but I use it every day. But
How often do you say sociology? That's what I'm saying is specific words are hard.
Once a year, maybe.
Because you're not exactly. That's what I mean. So, you know.
But so I studied that for almost half a year, so it was quite long for just studying sociology.
Yes, there you go.
I read about like how to handle crises in companies. I studied how to handle communication during crisis. I studied a lot of things actually that are very good to have when it was a pandemic and you were a leader and so on. And also the more psychology studies which I took are kind of a perfect complement to what I read as in organizational management, for example. And so funny enough, when I just thought about this the other day, it's like, how did I get where I am? Because I didn't have a clear plan when I studied. Definitely didn't. It was like I did that engineering thing. I didn't like it. I took some random courses to be able to jump on lighting design, which I thought would be nice. But then when I was studying that, I felt like my intellect wasn't challenged enough. So I took another bachelor in parallel with the engineering. But it's funny when I look back at it now, all the decisions that I took there are so clearly what led me to what I'm working with today. And it's also some of the things that probably made me a relatively good manager that I went through that. But it was definitely not with a clear plan thinking I will grow up and be the leader of something. It was just, it just happened. And I don't know, but a lot of, I also used to be a professional rower up until I was like 23 or 24. I was in the national rowing team for Sweden.
Wow. So you're fit then.
I have a fit mind, if nothing else. But that was, well, no, not 20 years ago. How old am I? No, but 15 years ago, maybe. Anyway, what my point being is that I kind of, when you practice a sport at that kind of professional level, you learn a lot about mentality, psychology, how your feelings affect others in the team, blah 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 blah. You learn to be goal orientated, and then you add my different university diplomas on to that, and it took me 2 years to work before I became a manager. So I think that my point being that I came here was because I probably always just had some, I don't know, I was born with some leadership skill, I think, because as you said, you read about grit, you read about growth mindset, but when I did it, it was the same for me. It's like, I think I'm doing that already. I have no idea there was a name, but
Yeah.
it's
Well,
there.
it's interesting because if you went backwards, so if you decided just to tell somebody a story and say, I studied this and this and this, and this is who I am now, they would go, well, of course, because you had planned it out. It would seem like a plan because everything you described fits so superbly with where you are now.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a bi-directional thing, right? It's causal in both directions. Because you had the skills, you were able to achieve what you've achieved. So of course it fits together. The skills you gained and your ability to use them caused the output, caused the outcome. I think it's funny you were talking about lighting design and your Bachelor of Engineering. I probably said it already today, I don't know, but I get confused. All the lines blur for me. But had I not basically flunked out or not done my homework in calculus, I would have been a mechanical engineer for sure, just because I'm an inventor. I've been an inventor since I was a child. And I thought it was interesting, though. I remember getting a job. It's an interesting point on the culture fit. I got a job, and when they gave me my aptitude test, I was the only person in history who obviously remembered my high school physics. A question based on the inverse squared law of lighting, right? It was like, here's a light on a table this distance away. Here's a light twice as bright shining on the floor. Which one is brighter, the table? And it's like, well, the floor is half as lit because of the inverse square law, half the distance, but so literally I knew the inverse square law. So I got that one question right that nobody else got right. And the irony of this is, while the bosses were impressed and I got the highest mark on the aptitude test at that point in the history in the company, what it meant, because the company was about rumors and about basically hating education, it was a printing company. I had people going around for perhaps years talking about, well, this guy thinks he's so smart because he has a university degree, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know any of this is going on. So I was more or less kind of a pariah because I did well on a test I didn't even know I did well on for years, because in that business culture, other people resented it because the average education in the company was like grade 8. It's like, I don't care what your education level is, but the company culture collectively certainly did. And I only found this out after the fact, but it was sort of like people were hating me because I got a good mark on a test. I didn't know I'd gotten a good mark. So
Well, as long as they didn't hate you right straight to your face, then maybe.
Yeah, mostly not. Yeah, mostly not. They did lots of backstabbing. It was very vulture culture there. So the next one is, what focus would influence? Oh, we already did that one. Sorry, you answered that. Yes. Okay, next. Okay, so what formats or delivery methods would be most effective considering your schedule and learning preferences, or those of your organization?
Well, also due to experience, I would say the most effective training is a combination of training. And this is probably also because how we retain information need to be repetitive. So for example, when I've done leadership trainings, they are often comprised of, say, 1 week where you mix lectures with group of efforts and role play. And then you have like a year where you practice those things in your company and you train on the different leadership styles and what you've learned in that first set. And then you come back in a year or in 2 years, and you do the next step. And then you have the same procedure, try it out in your company, come back in 1 or 2 years again for the third and last step. And what I also find effective in combination to that is that before you start the next level, you have to do a test. So you need to actually make it a test where you answer things which you wouldn't know if you couldn't describe how it went when you tried those new skills in your company. So you're kind of forced a little bit to make sure that you use what you've learned.
Right. So Oh, sorry. I just wanted to encapsulate that if we could. So it's like combination training of lectures, group work, role play with assessment cycled yearly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also feedback from the trainer. So you, for example, if I would say half a year in after the course, they would call you back and they say, hi, how is doing? Do you need to talk about something? Do you need any feedback? Can we help you in any way? And I think that's also very good.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Next one is, let's see here. Okay. When it comes to investing in leadership and culture development, what criteria do you consider when determining the value of a course?
That also depends. I think it's very different if you're, yeah, it depends very much on what they're supposed to learn. For example, I have had colleagues over the years that were great lighting designers, but they needed to get better business skills. For them, the best practice was not going on a course, but going with me to a client, seeing how I talk to them and getting over time them to take over those meetings. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I had mentors who needed to be better, they often need to do changes, which are slightly more difficult, I would say, rather than maybe sales skill. At least from my experience, it is harder for a lot of people to change into the best. So, for example, for someone who needs to learn leadership or understanding value of a value-based company culture, you would need longer time and a combination training, like the one I just described as leadership training. Whereas if it's, say, one of my more junior designers, maybe they need to be better at a computer software. They probably need like a theoretical course, a session when they sit with the teacher, look how it's done, and then use that program in all their coming projects to just, learn by doing. So, as I said before, it depends.
Yeah, it depends. It's a dependent variable. Okay, so the next one. And yeah, I totally agree. It's like, it makes sense, right? If being a better dancer or being a better salesperson is what they need, well, then it needs to be sort of taught in a way that allows them to apply it rather than just know how it should be applied. So next one, can you share your thoughts on the, we've already kind of done this. I'll give it to you anyway, but I think you can just say asked and answered, because of course, whether these answers are relevant depends on what has preceded them during the interview. Okay, so can you share your thoughts on the frequency of coaching sessions, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, that would align best with your needs or those of your clients? Obviously, we're talking about an average because indeed it's...
Yes, indeed, it depends. But for example, if we're talking about my clients and in regards of how we do work, it's probably enough to have like a meeting in the beginning, some sort of feedback talk, half into the project to see if we are eye to eye, and then one afterwards seeing did we deliver on what we promised, and are you happy with the results, and what could we have done differently to learn from the experience. So like 3 different ones that could be on spread out over a year or 2 years, because sometimes we work like in infrastructure projects and they take a very long time.
Right. But in that case, what would be the frequency of those meetings? Would it be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, some other?
It would be with a client, maybe every 3 months.
Okay, quarterly.
So not so often. But with your company, like the project group, it would be weekly. And in the project group, you would have someone representing the client. So you would have meetings with the group that's doing the project, with all the engineers and with the leader and some representative of the client who is normally the project leader. But so those would be weekly with extra ones for review 2 times a year review. And then the client, like just more, to evaluate satisfaction and that we are still in agreement of we're doing the right thing. That those would be like every 3 months.
Excellent.
And then within the project team, you will have even closer ones. So for example, a senior designer with a junior designer would have additional meetings.
Right. So that's
discussing and giving feedback.
Right. So that's when you're talking about now in the context of working with clients, quarterly for the whole company, but then on a more microscopic level, you would have more frequent.
Yeah.
So how frequent would those ones be? Would those be twice a month or once a week also?
No, if we go into very frequently, but we're still talking about projects and our clients, then
right.
it be, well, once a week, and then you could have 2 or 3 people who meet also once a week themselves, so it would be 2 meetings.
Okay, so 2 meetings a week.
But if you ask about, like, we often work quite structurally with feedback talks with our employees, so we would have that quarterly. So you have a meeting in the beginning of the year where you look at how it went the year before, summarize, set goals, and then you kind of follow them up every third.
Right, makes sense.
Throughout the year.
Okay. The next one then is what types of ongoing demand or support on demand or mentorship would be most beneficial? So outside of, let's say, you have a lot going on there that I think would make this possibly unnecessary, but the person that is being trained, whether it's your employee, let's focus on that for now. Whether they just go, I'm really stuck, I need help, we're a week away from the meeting or 3 days away from the meeting, I really don't know what to do. So whether they have a manager mentor or a group mentorship program that they can access, like a mastermind of other students. So what types of that kind of support on demand or
we
mentorship?
have both. We have both.
Okay.
So for example, that's one of the reasons why we have that talk in the beginning of the year, identifying if there were things that were difficult, if the person felt like they got the help they needed and they had the support they needed to do their job. And I've actually had employees who worked for 20 years that needed a mentor, and other ones worked for 2 years and they needed a mentor. And we've then worked structurally with 2 people doing that over the course of a year normally at first, but then they normally get a close, relationship anyway, and it keeps going.
It perpetuates all by itself after that, maybe.
But in general, in our groups, we have a very clear understanding to all our seniors that it's their job to educate the juniors. So it's on their responsibility to help if they need help in regards of the projects, and to be like to understand that the mentor is there to answer things about the business, about your, say, pay or monthly vacation and blah blah blah. But when it is in regards of competence for lighting design, they should be able to ask any of the senior lighting designers to get the answers that they need.
Right.
And so normally we have here always a junior and a senior working together, because I've also seen that the seniors grow when they have the quite fresh view of things from the junior that comes into the project as well. So you have senior experience and you have influences, and it's a very good combination.
Okay, so just so you know, I'm sorry, but I'm literally down to 5 minutes. I have another interview after this, so let me fire these last 2 off quickly for you. So it's like, how do you envision the course helping you address specific cultural leadership challenges within?
So, sorry, do you mean what course we would need to do that?
No, that assuming you've identified the course that you need, what would it help you address specifically in terms of cultural or leadership challenges?
That also depends. I mean, in my company now, I have no challenges. It's kind of me and 2 other people. It's very new. In the previous company where you have that crazy CEO, for example, I definitely needed to address bullying, name calling, fear and control, and make them understand what the negative side of that is and what the cost of doing that is, so they can try and do things differently.
Right. So it depends on the specific company and their needs to put it in.
Yeah, definitely, because we're people, and people are different. So, and essentially, what is a company? Is different kinds of people with different kinds of needs and personalities. So, and wouldn't that be like the essential leadership skill to understand? Like
Yes.
that, it depends. It's just, I mean, you can't just draw a line and expect that everything will follow.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate that you can't answer all things all at once, but I couldn't agree with you more that of course it always has dependency. So I guess what you could say, on the numerical average, given the greatest sample size, what do you think are the most common, right? Because that's really what these questions are asking. So yeah,
I'm not good.
yeah,
But the most
I
common
totally
is
understand.
probably what we talked about in the beginning.
Right.
To implement the understanding of adapting your message to your audience.
Right. Asked and answered. And that's as I'm asking these final questions, it's like this has basically already been answered. I'm going to tick them off, but yes, literally, if you say asked and answered, because I think you've answered everything. Okay, so last one. And thank you for being such a good sport and determined to make this call happen. Considering the potential impact on your organization, what pricing model would you find the most appealing regarding the kind of training we've described above? So this could be one-time payment, monthly, quarterly, subscription. What would be sort of the most effective for your organization or your client organizations as you've had experience with?
One-time things.
That's been the universal.
Because the needs change over time. And I don't know, I would want to have an annual license for AutoCAD, but to have an annual license for company training, no, but maybe a contract with a company doing trainings that I would get a discount with when I use them frequently.
Right. Okay. It's interesting because literally, I'm bad for 3. Everybody's saying one-time payment. It's like there seems to be sort of an accumulation of data towards this specific point more than any others, though there's lots of other overlap. Thank you so much for your time. I will ping you when this is ready and I start posting it up. I literally have 1 minute to get to my next interview, so bless you. Thank you so much, Kim. It was a delight.
Thank you.
Take
Nice
care.
meeting you.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bless you. Bless you. And is it okay if I share this out in whole and part in social media? That's part of my intention, though my priority is really just to learn from you. If that's okay with you, we're doing awesome. Okay.
As long as the sound is okay, I think the social media will accept it. But if it's too noisy here, then
Actually, it isn't. It's actually
good.
there's a little bit of distortion, but I understand you perfectly, and I hear no background noise. So that's impressive given where it appears you are. Okay.